were rocking.
That's a cool intro, bro.
That was something else.
But my wife hates it because we're like bobbleheads. But is the microphone any better?
It's got a little bit of the crackle, but I mean, I don't think it's terrible.
All right. Okay. I'm gonna bring up Zach. Just because we're running because oh no.
No, what's going on, man?
All right. So
Hey, Zach.
everybody,
Hey,
I'm
guys.
sorry. I had a little bit of technical difficulties with a mic. If it sounds like crap, I apologize. So I'm just going to bring everybody up. We have Noah here, biologist, fishery. We got Zach, biologist in the fisheries. He is Noah's student. We got man, what the hell is your name? Hold on. Let me hold on. What's your name?
Oh, Sam Tudor. No, I can't believe Sam wanted it at the last minute.
Okay. I'll probably play that once or twice. This is probably the last time Steve's never coming back on the live stream. But we have a special guest. Hey, look, I had a whole year to build up for this 9-second clip. So we have Lenny Rudow here with us too. I really appreciate everybody coming up and talking. Stripers. So let me really quick, I wanted to talk before I actually brought you guys up, but as we bring everybody up. All right, so this was actually going to be my last live stream for the season, maybe in the wintertime. But my name's Sam, if anybody's here new with Lenny. My name's Sam. I have a YouTube channel that's called Outdoors in Maryland. I do a lot of blue crabbing, some fishing, some food recipes on my channel. And one of my big things is my blue crabbing videos. And especially when I go out with my buddy and my next door neighbor, Captain Rachel. She is a commercial crabber in Chesapeake Bay. She's a water woman and she's a trout miner for crabs. So I said, you know what? Maybe we can try to get one more before maybe the season really starts really, going for them to get too busy to do anything. So she's okay with it. So I wanted to get a potter, somebody that actually brings up the pots and have two different versions of the Chesapeake Bay. He couldn't make it. So I just figured I was going to nix it. So I had another idea. So next week at 7:30, next Tuesday, I'm actually going to have commercial crabbers. I'm going to have one from Florida, his name's Kurt. And I'm going to have a commercial crabber named Robert from Louisiana. So these three guys are going to come in, and I thought it would be cool to not only talk about the different regulations, the difference in the way we eat them, the way we steam them, the way we cook them, the way we, everything. I had about a 20-minute talk with Robert from Louisiana. Love their accent. It's really cool. He was telling me how he realized now because his season's starting to slow up. Because everybody knows, a lot of our crabs we get up here in Maryland during the wintertime are from Louisiana. So now they're starting to slow up. But he said his season for blue crabs and everything never stops. It's all year long. He actually shrimps and he actually oysters. And there's an interesting thing that Steve and everybody talks about is that when we're here, we talk on our bay about how in our freshwaters, how the salt water is coming up, in the bays and everything. He's saying that it's like the opposite. The freshwater is taking, down there, it's more freshwater, I guess, from the Mississippi River and everything where they're at. So the flows from the Mississippi River. So I think that would be interesting next week. All right. I have the first question of the night. And I don't know who's on here. I don't see, we've got 19 people. That's pretty cool. So my first question is for Lenny, is because as a YouTuber, any YouTuber, especially Steve, will understand this. We are called nothing but spot burners and know-it-alls. And, when we listen to your live streams, you really do give, I don't know if you give specific spots. Sometimes. But to me, you're really, when you talk, you're about the novice, somebody out there trying to start fishing, teaching them how to rig it, what to rig it, and all that stuff. So how much flack do you actually get for that?
So I get a ton of flack for that. But I have given away spots freely my God for decades. Rudow's Guide to Fishing the Chesapeake, my best-selling book, lists out 550 hotspots from the CBBT to Havre de Grace. So it's nothing new to me. Let me tell you how I look at it, and I really think it's very simple. It's called sharing. You can be selfish, or you can share. Those are like your options in life, you know.
But you're going to take all the fish.
You're
telling everybody.
You know what? They're so it's funny. People always complain. Oh, so they say social media's ruined everything. They say spot birding ruins everything. More fishermen than ever. Go back and look at the DNR records. There are actually fewer fishing licenses out there right now than there were before the recession of 08. The recession of 08 caused a little bit of a crash, but in 04, 05, 06, 07, the license numbers were very similar to what they are today, and that's actually a recovered number. Now, look, I'm pretty darn old. I've been around a long time, right? And I have watched literally generations of anglers come into the fishing community, get all aggravated that people gave away all their spots, and then kind of fade off into nowhere. And then another generation comes along and complains about the same exact spots. I mean, this goes on and on. I've actually been called out, believe it or not, for giving away the secret spot called the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. That has happened. So, look, you know what? If you're that good an angler, if you're that big a hot shot, go find another spot. You can find other spots where there are fish, right? If you're really that good, instead of complaining, why don't you share a little bit? Don't be selfish about it. Help these other folks who are coming up, who maybe are struggling to catch a keeper fish.
Mhm.
Help them figure it out and find a spot that'll work and do their thing. And, you know, if they want to go to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge or the power plant, God forbid you talk about that, or one of these other spots where there are a lot of fish around, God bless them. You know, let them have some fun. And if you're that good, go find your own fish somewhere else. Now, that's my spiel on that. But, Sam, I just got to take a pause real quick. I have a request.
Absolutely.
When you talk to the Louisiana folks, would you please thank them for sending us crabs in the winter, but also remind them that our crabs are, in fact, superior.
I will do that. I would do that. I would do that very gently and nicely.
Because they are, right?
Well, ain't that what Maryland's known for? Well, you know, and there's actually something else. I mean, no, I know we're actually going to talk about this because as we're talking blue cats and snakeheads being invasive. So I was watching a show from Meat Eater this weekend. Sunday, I was sitting around and watching it. And so in California, on the Delta, they have a salmon run. I think it's called a Chinook salmon that run up the Delta to spawn. Now, a lot of their complaints was because of all the dams that they're not letting enough water in for enough room. But the species that they're actually invasive, that it's messing with it, is stripers.
Yep.
The stripers are actually they're actually telling how bad the stripers are. Where here, you know, we're talking about how can we save the population of stripers. You know what I mean?
I can't believe you're bringing this up because I watched this about probably 4 hours ago. I watched that same video. Yeah. And I actually worked out there for a couple of years before coming here to do my master's. So I am familiar with that whole complex, salmon striper complex out there in California. Yeah, like you said, you know, the hydrological modifications, you know, the dams, the water diversion, definitely having an impact out there for sure. I mean, how could it not? It's one of the most hydrologically modified systems in the world, right? So, and that just kind of helps stripers' ability to eat juvenile salmon too. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I just removed him from the stream. Holy moly crap. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Don't piss off Sam. You're out of here.
You're out of here, man.
Yeah.
I apologize.
No, that's fine.
What you had to say, Zach.
Yep.
Can't be trisent striper around here, and non-native or native.
No, I have to apologize to Noah because I met him last week. I had to go down to Salisbury, so I asked him if he would meet me because I wanted to give him his prize that he won. And man, it was so windy like it is today, and it was cold. So I was standing, I got my shorts on, I'm going into Home Depot, and we're talking, and as we're talking, the wind's just getting worse. And I'm like, I'm kind of cold. And I'm trying not to blow him off because it's really the first time meeting him in person. So I didn't want him to think that I was really rude, so I apologize for kind of saying, hey man, I'm cold. Go away.
It's all good. I didn't even notice any wind though.
Well, that's because
I gave that JO seasoning a try on some fries. It's great. I gotta say it's better than Old Bay. And I'm gonna right after this I'm gonna blacken some snakehead with some of that JO seasoning.
I got your back, dude. I got your back when they come for you about Old Bay. I love Old Bay too. But there's some applications JO just takes out.
It's all Old Bay's all right, but I think JO just got that little bit extra better flavor. And I know that's a controversial thing. I'm not a Maryland native, so I don't want to start anything. But
you're upsetting me.
Yeah. So we got. So we had. I actually read that today. Now we're getting into the snake and stuff, and I really want to talk stripers, but we will talk about this real quick. So I guess people are fishing in waters maybe they're not supposed to be fishing in or whatever. So Anglers is actually making somebody, whoever wins, has to take a polygraph test. So I'll tell you my quick opinion that if you got to go through all this for a fishing tournament, then I just wouldn't hold a damn tournament. It is $6,000 and somebody's going to be really ticked off. Tournaments can really be,
Oh, Sam Tudor. No, I can't believe Sam won it at the last minute. Oh, I'm never going to hear the end of this. I am never going to hear the end of this.
All right, sorry.
Well, I actually heard a little bit of the inside scoop of what's going on with that tournament. And it seems like some people, just again, I'm not saying who I heard this from or where I heard this, but I've heard that some people in that tournament were taking photos of some of the fish and then giving it to their buddy to then take photos of and sharing around like that. And so
really?
I'm hearing some of the dramas, and I can see how that's problematic.
Yeah.
Jesus. Why? It's now look, that's a big prize. But all right, look, okay. All right.
It's a shame all around. We probably shouldn't get too derailed by it, but yeah, it's just definitely a shame.
We could do a live stream 3 weeks from now. We'll just talk about people. There's always got to be a butthead in the group. And I'll try to keep this as clean as I can, Lenny. I apologize. All right.
What it makes me think about is, can anyone tell me the last time there was not multiple lawsuits involved with the White Marlin Open winner? I don't know how many years it's been. And obviously that's much higher dollar, but I can see how they're running into this. It's not a shocker.
This is something we're taking consideration where we just applied for a grant to host a blue catfish and snakehead tournament on the Nanticoke, and hopefully we get it so we can host this summer. But something I was discussing with the DNR folks is how much money should we put in for prize money? If we put in $10,000, that gives people incentive to cheat. If we do a few $100 maybe and make the entry free, then more people will do it with less likely to cheat. And so that's something to consider.
Well, if you're going to do that the way you do just like you do it on the Potomac, you actually have to launch off at the same spot, and everybody's got to make sure they check their live wells before they leave, and then everybody comes back. And when everybody comes back, now if they got a buddy sitting down somewhere with a dead catfish, 60-pound catfish, they're going to extremes. But today you would never know.
For our research, though, it's important that it doesn't come from somewhere else, because if we're studying the Nanticoke and what they're eating, and somebody catches this from the Potomac and drives it over, that affects our research. So we want to still offer enough incentive for more people to come out without making it too much of incentive where people may be more likely to cheat, or that could, in a way that could then skew our data.
Yeah,
it's a balance.
So are you guys hearing me okay now?
Yeah, you're not too bad, Sam. Go for it, man.
All right, sorry about that. All right, so May 1st. I don't know how the impacts of closing 1 month off really helps the fishery, but you got May 1st. So I would think we can talk about this time of the year. What do you think your main forage is, and then how about we ask you guys, or at least go around the board? What do you think probably would be the best technique this time of year to be catching stripers?
Okay.
Lenny.
Well, historically, I always bait fished for spring trophies. I enjoy that fishery, liked it very much. I just don't do it anymore. I think last year I took my son out for about 2 hours one day. We caught some catfish, and it was fun.
Not a lot of ice.
But we didn't catch any rockfish, and honestly, I was kind of relieved. I don't know. At this point, I just kind of can't even find it in me to really target those fish. Now, that said, I don't fault anybody else for doing it as long as it's legal. Go for it. And the fact of the matter is, the most effective way to catch those fish will be trolling 80 gazillion tandem rigs and umbrellas. It's not an incredibly sporting way to fish, it's not like light tackle or anything. But if you want to talk about surely what is the best way to catch one of those big old rockfish as they're heading back down the bay, it's going to be trolling. I mean, we always used to call it collision fishing because the idea was you put as many lures out there as you possibly can and wait for a fish to collide with one. That's why the charter boats put out an obscene number of rods, 18, 20, 24 rods. It's kind of crazy. To me, it just seems kind of crazy. But, that is going to be the most effective way to catch one of those big old fish if you want to do that. And there are plenty of guys out there who really enjoy fishing like that, who crimp their barbs down, who use single hooks, who take a picture and put the fish right back in the water. And God bless them. That's great. But if you absolutely want to catch a fish, trolling is going to be the number one most effective way to do it. That's not to say you can't do it in other ways, shapes, or forms, but it's most effective.
Uh-oh, Sam, we can't hear you, brother.
Sam, we totally lost you now.
I can catch 20, 18, 19, 20-inch fish shallow on top water all day long and not care about that big fish at all. That's just me. I mean, I'm a bass fisherman at heart, so that's like, hitting a major point, throwing a top water is probably is a wonderful thing.
Yep.
Personally, I'm inclined to agree. For the first couple of weeks of the season, I may well hold back. I haven't made any hard decisions. I might go catfishing. I might go catfishing. When May 15 opens up and you can catch some of the medium-sized fish, it'll be a little more fun to get in the game at that point.
Mm-hmm.
At the point when we're talking about the biology part of it, stuff like that, I know that my buddy gave me a nice rant again today. I was talking to Lenny earlier. When we're talking about, I just read an article yesterday, and oh my God, I can't believe it. And I tried to print it out, and it didn't print out the way I wanted to. But it was a 2021. It was talking about the juvenile stripers in the Chesapeake Bay. And my buddy's telling me we talk about everything. He thinks it's a lot of the charter captains and a lot of out in the ocean where they're netting the hell out of stripers out there, but you got stripers that will take 15 guys out on a boat, and each one's got one over 30 some inches of fish. You got a whole boatload of them. And he said he thinks he has a problem with that. And I don't know. I think, always heard I was just talking, who the hell was I talking to? About, if you got a big giant yellow perch that's a breeder, why wouldn't you put it back? So if you got a big giant breeding stripers, if you want the fishery, wouldn't you want to? I would think you want to throw it back. And who wants to eat them? I mean, I don't know who cuts them up and eats something that big, right?
So Sam, if I could hop in here then, because this is where I really want to hear from Zach and Noel on this especially, is that we've seen what the slot fishery, like putting a slot limit on what that's done for the redfish fishery, right, down in Florida, and the stock has rebounded, immensely. It's just we've seen, given that example that we have, I know the variables are different in different fisheries. You have to account for those kind of things. But do you all see, and I don't know if it's politically feasible or not, but do you all see a slot limit as the best solution for kind of trying to help the striped bass fishery to kind of restore itself? Because we can see it's on a trend downward. You can look up the articles. We've all seen that. A lot of times we see that experience on the water too. But like Noah and Zach, as fisheries biologists, I'd be really interested to hear what y'all have to say on the kind of slot idea for managing the striped bass.
So I would say, first of all, I think a slot is one of perhaps several solutions that could help the striped bass population. But unfortunately, it's not as simple as just over harvesting. They're being hit by a few different problems at the same time, and so a solution for one of each of these problems only helps with one of these problems. So first off, their populations are low. They've been overfished, and there's some overfishing based on their current population levels. And so I think some slots could help them rebound by protecting those very large individuals that produce more and more offspring. So fish, unlike a lot of other animals, have undergo what's known as indeterminate growth, as in they just keep growing for the rest of their life. But they keep growing and growing and growing. But at a certain size, they shift a lot of their energy to, instead of growing bigger in their body, into producing more eggs. And so the larger and larger individuals produce disproportionately more eggs. So if you have a 50-pound striped bass female, that'll produce way more eggs than 5-10-pound striped bass.
So it's kind of like the blue catfish you were talking the last time.
Exactly. It's something like that where the larger individuals can devote more of their energy to reproduction rather than growth. Some of the other issues that they're facing is, again, invasive species. So they're competing against invasive species like blue catfish and snakeheads that are eating the same prey sources, so that there's less prey for them. And some of these invasive species are also directly eating the striped bass. And so I think, Zach, what was it like? You found a 19-inch striper in a 30-inch blue cat?
Yeah, I mean that is what I guess that's one of the fish that came out of the tournament, the Sharptown Catfish tournament from a couple weeks ago. So yeah, it is definitely possible. I think the invasives are having some sort of impact, although I don't know how. I don't think it was an extremely prevalent diet item either in Virginia or in what we're seeing up here. So like, as far as what I've been able to identify from the stomachs, that was the first striper that we found. But I definitely think like you said, there are multiple factors contributing to the decline, and I think that definitely it's feasible that that's one of them.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
My buddy is blaming a lot on Virginia too. That they're what we have and what they have. I mean, they can crab all year long. I think they can do everything all year long. So anything coming up to Chesapeake Bay, if they're allowed to, they don't have an off season or something down there. I don't know. It's kind of what he was telling me.
I can touch on that.
Well, before we point fingers at Virginia, let's remember they were quicker to shut down the trophy season than Maryland has been. In fact, Maryland still has not. Virginia's done away with it entirely, and they've got a slot imposed in very tight regulations. They've certainly got, there's certainly areas to criticize. I think we're about to hear one, right?
Adding on to the Virginia side of things there is Omega Protein is based in Virginia, which is a large commercial operation that's basically responsible for collecting almost 80% of the entire Atlantic coast, Menhaden, and they do that basically right at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay. And there's some legislation right now there's a movement to change the management of Menhaden, so that basically reducing the amount of caught in the bay. And Menhaden is a huge bait source and food source for a lot of different things like striped bass, osprey, dolphins, you name it. They eat it because they're so abundant, but they're being overfished. And so not only is it invasive species and perhaps overfishing, but there is less food for them. And so it's another factor that's impacting them. So we need to have action to have less menhaden taken out so there's more food. Because even if you were to reduce, let's say, the fishing pressure, there still may not be as much food for them, so they're not going to recover as much. And then somebody asked a question that I want to touch on with this is about, like, how is there not that much striper in the bay? Even you're catching some smaller ones a lot. This has to do with something known as shifting baselines. And so you may remember, like, way back, you see all those black and white photos of people with like human-sized striped bass and hundreds of them at once. That used to be an average fishing day 100 years ago, where people would catch all of these giant fish and tons of them. But now people would they wouldn't even try to go for the smaller ones. They just get all these bigger ones and then keep the bigger ones. But now that those bigger ones are much longer lived and take longer to get that size. So after you take those out of the ocean, if you take those at too high of a rate, the maximum size of these fish is going to go down. And not only that, the numbers are then going to go down because of the effects on removing those most reproductive ones. And so, sure, you may not notice these changes over time. Like, oh, you can still have a good fishing day now, and you can still catch some big fish. But let's say 10 years ago, let's say today I catch 10 striped bass that are all 10 pounds in the river on light tackle, have a great time. The next year, maybe I catch 9 and they're all 9 pounds. I'm like, okay, that's still a pretty good day. And the next year, 8 pounds and 8 fish. And then let's say 5 years later, 5 fish of 5 pounds. You may not notice it all immediately at once. And this is just a oversimplified example, but this thing adds up. And so it creeps in, you don't even notice it, but the average fish size is going down and the number of those larger fish are going down. And so you can still have a good day, but it's all relative. That's what that shifting baseline is. So now if you go to the river, you may get a couple good striped bass and that'd be like, oh, I had a good day. 100 years ago, you'd be like, oh, that's a terrible day. Where are all these 100-pound striped bass all over the place? And so you could still catch them, but you look back in time, it could be better. And so by reducing catches now, we can potentially increase it to a time where it's even better. Like us fishery biologists, we want people to catch fish and we want them to catch big and most fish. But some of that means a little less fish now so we can have more and bigger fish in the future.
Oh, Sam, we lost your audio again, brother.
I turned it off. I'm sorry. I don't want to burp on, I don't want to be rude or nothing. There's possible there might be another guest sometime. I don't know if he's going to make it. I know he's flounder fishing, but there is a slot limit down in the coastal waters of Ocean City, and I don't know if I think it's got to be above 28, but below like 35 or something like that. So there's the slot limit, and you're only allowed one. So that's in the coastal areas. How do you guys feel about just having a complete, straightforward slot limit? Nothing over a certain amount. You got to be in this area.
Personally, I mean, I think it's definitely one of those things that could help, right? So I'm in favor of the idea. I mean, it's something that we saw, like you mentioned, Steve, with redfish. I mean, their numbers were really, really reduced back in the day. I believe it was like in the 70s, right? So their numbers were decimated because of the whole black and redfish fiasco, where it got really popular, the dish, and everybody wanted to go out and all of a sudden catch redfish. And they started killing off all these big individuals. And it's like, it's like you said, with the bigger individuals producing more eggs, the more of those you remove from the population, the worse recruitment you're going to see in years following. So it's I like the idea. I think it's definitely something to be considered for sure. Like you said, though, it's one solution to one aspect of the problem. Yeah.
So I didn't realize this. It isn't. So stripers aren't like bass where it's a game fish, right? Stripers are considered. My buddy said it, and I don't remember what he called it. They're you guys, you're the biologist. That's why I brought you here. You got to tell me. So he said stripers are not a game fish, right?
Well, they're sold commercially.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. So it's not like.
Right. And
people are a sport fish. A game fish implies they're not really commercial. Like a largemouth bass, you don't really see those in the commercial market. Whereas a sport fish, it has the qualities of a game fish where people fish for them because of the way they fight. But again, there's a commercial fishery. In Maryland, the commercial fishery is not as big as the recreational fishery. I think the number of landings is about 5% of it in Maryland is commercial and 95% is recreational. So I know some people blame the commercial, like they're catching all the fish, but they're catching 5%. We're catching.
We're talking about the ocean, but now we're talking about the ocean. Them stripers are migrative, so they go up. They're going up to do. They go from the bay, if I'm not mistaken, up the coast to New England or whatever. If I'm not mistaken, I believe they're like migratory. So we're talking about the guys in the ocean that are catching netfuls of stripers.
Still a much bigger recreational catch.
I was going to say, I think
catch is much bigger.
Up and down.
What is the commercial catch overall for the entire Atlantic states? I think it's
still like 5%.
Yeah, I was going to say it's definitely less than 10%. And I think recreationally it's up to 90%, but I think it varies year by year, right? But I think up to 90%. And I think about they estimate mortality from recreational fishing at 9%. So you think if recreational anglers are catching 90% of the fish and 9% of them die, yeah, I mean, it's just another aspect that makes the striper fishery on the Atlantic coast so that much more complicated. But I think it's easy, I think, to point the finger at commercial people like running nets for striper, although like what the numbers tell us as far as landings go suggests that that's likely not having the most impact.
So there's one thing we could explore here really quickly, and Noah or Zach, you could probably break it down as much as anybody. I did some master's work on it, and that's essentially like the history of the Magnuson Act and getting into the Atlantic State Marine Fishery Council. Because when you are dealing with a species that's migratory, it crosses state borders. And when it's crossing state borders, that means you have regulatory bodies in each of those states. If you don't have some type of coordination mechanism, if one state's doing the right thing, but 5 other states are doing the wrong thing, you're going to have big problems. It's not going to make that much of an impact. So, I mean, maybe just really briefly, you could break down exactly how those regulations are set from like the Marine Fisheries Council.
Okay, so I actually was nominated to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Council for New York State. I ultimately did not get the appointment, but I was one of the 3 nominees brought up to the governor. And so I was involved in some of this stuff, and give me a few years of establishing myself in Maryland, and I'll probably run for it again to represent Maryland. But there are a few different managing bodies. There's the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, which is basically you have representatives from each state with the Atlantic coast that will meet, and they will make these decisions of species that affect the entire coastline, like things like striped bass that migrate through multiple different regions along the coast. Then you also have some things like the North Atlantic Marine Fish, or like the Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Management Council that manages species that are mostly found from New York down to North Carolina. And so there's some smaller regional ones, but let's just focus on, and they work pretty similarly. But those will manage waters within 3 miles from the shoreline. That is state waters, and so the states have control over that, particularly for those regional fisheries management bodies. And then there's federal waters, which is from 3 to 200 miles offshore, and that's regulated federally. And you have those Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Council that is more federal. It's like regional federal, eastern federal, essentially, but they help manage that as well, trying to create regulations for that whole larger body of U.S. waters at 3 to 200 miles offshore, where things migrate freely, like marlin and tuna and things like that, just to keep regulations in federal waters similar or basically the same, so that it may vary a little bit depending on states, depending on the abundance. Let's say if there's like more of this fish in this state and less in this state, then they would have more catches in that other state that has more of them. But essentially this means that if this fish is going to migrate from, let's say, the waters offshore of like 150 miles offshore of Maryland, goes back to Delaware, then keeps going back and forth between Maryland and Delaware, it makes sure that the fish is protected by the same regulations, so that there isn't overfishing by one state in federal waters than in the others. Which is also, because of this is why there's a push to have the Menhaden commercial fishery pushed offshore, so that past those 3 miles, so that it's protected by the federal fishing regulations rather than just by the state regulations, where essentially Virginia can more or less control what they want to do with that, or whichever state. I say Virginia in this example of the Menhaden, but let's say Maryland wants to catch every single striped bass in Maryland within 3 miles of the shoreline. That's a decision for the Maryland state to make, which I do not recommend, but again,
Lenny, you were going to say something before. What were you going to say?
Well, I'm busy Googling on commercial versus rec harvest because the numbers didn't sound right to me. Depending on which source you pull up, the commercial allocation coastwide is about 40%. So it's a little less lopsided than we were talking about. However, the actual harvest numbers have gone as high as 90% to recreational, depending on whose numbers you believe, partially because of the whole problem with the big MRIP mess that we all know is a mess, and the alleged 9% mortality rate, nobody really knows exactly how many fish are dying out there. We're trying to count the fish in the sea. I mean, it's
Right.
a Sisyphean task. It's just practically impossible. So, but anyway, the bottom line is it could be as high as 90% recreational take versus 10% commercial, or as low as 60% recreational take, 40% commercial. And it depends on what source you hit on as to where in that range it exactly lies.
So as we get into all that, I want to talk fishing. So I mean, I love all the biology stuff, but I want guys on here that if you were fishing this time of year, do you think they would be? So it's going to be we always got the residential stripers that are around. I mean, would you even try this time of year to even try to target them, or would
Right
you
now, I
just?
wouldn't, because I get a ticket.
Yeah.
Oh, not now. I meant May 1st. I meant May 1st.
Man, that would be bad. That would look
Yeah.
really, really bad.
May
So-
1st. I'm sorry.
So come May, you absolutely can. I would strongly encourage anybody who wants to do that to fish with artificials only and to fish with single hook lures. You do not want to be like pulling the plugs with the big trebles on them, during May when you're going to be throwing those fish back. Jigs, single hooks,
Have reported.
I personally don't believe the 9% mortality rate at all. I think our science is horrible and very dated, and we really desperately need better science. I'm sorry, I know you wanted to get to the fishing and not so much.
No, that's fine with me because when you get all that information, see what we were talking about, that's fine. We got all the information. It's like you're going to do all that stuff on an nanocode. And now look, please guys, do not take me in any way wrong. I'm just really kind of, if you're going to do all that for a whole year, you're going to sit down there, you're going to do all that stuff for snakeheads and catfish. But once you find out what the problem is, then what do we do to fix it? So I was questioning my buddy. So you guys get if snakeheads are that invasive, blue cats are that invasive, and you got this boat that has this electronic thing on it that can pull up 1,500 blue cats because stun them. Why can't you take them out? You know what I mean? I mean, I know it's probably not, it's against the law, but I don't know if it's even against the law because they're invasive. But I always just thought about that. I mean, why can't you just, hey man, start chucking them into the boat?
Yeah, I mean that's actually something that has been discussed, right? Like down in Virginia, I think they, at least to my knowledge, approved some commercial electrofishing, right? So I think you're now starting to see some of that starting to take place. I don't think it is allowed in Maryland. I know it's pretty controversial amongst some of the managers, and I think the reason for that is just having a lot of people out, electrofishing on the water. You could potentially cause some harm to native fish, right? So if you're using certain settings that are more likely to injure the fish beyond just temporarily stunning them, that could definitely have some impacts on like migrating striped bass and some of the river herring species that are threatened, right? So I think that it is definitely, like you said, that's a tactic that has been proposed and it is happening, I believe, in Virginia.
They're letting recreational guys go out and electric fish. No,
commercial.
Yeah, commercial. Okay.
So, and there are lots of regulations.
I could see it. I could see that.
Let me ask a question to the bio guys, because we got a strong team of bio guys here. Looking at examples like the Midwest where they have the flying carp, right? Mm-hmm. And the blue cats like we got. I mean, honestly, isn't it kind of hopeless to think about eliminating those fish?
Well, so we're not going to be able to get rid of them. We're not going to be able to get rid of them. What we can do is, like, they've established themselves so much that, short of killing every fish in the Chesapeake Bay and all the tributaries, they're not going to go away. But we can understand their impacts on the native diversity as best we can, so we can protect areas that may be more sensitive than others, may have, let's say, local endemic endangered species. And we can also learn as much as we can so that we know if they get into other bodies of water, how to act most quickly to prevent them from spreading. And so they're not in every body of water right now, but some people keep releasing them and more, and that's causing new effects. But we can learn as much as we can, so then we can say, hey, like this is exactly why you should not release them here, and this, if they do released, here's likely how this is going to unfold.
They don't listen.
They
don't listen. I mean, all the guys that have to go, look, I don't. Y'all hear that it's snakehead guys are on here. I'm just going to be honest with you. Whatever clowns picked them fish up from down Blackwater and moved them over to the Western Shore to tell me that the snakeheads, and I'm sorry we're getting on the snakeheads again, but to think that them snakeheads blew up over there on the Western Shore that quick, like up in Bush River and all them areas, that quickly and that much in such a short period of time, thinking that nobody took them fish over there, you're out of your mind. People are stupid. I'm sorry. Some people are just ignorant.
There are definitely people moving them around, and I was talking to Yanar, and that's definitely a big thing because you don't need people to move around much. They survive pretty well in transit because they can breathe air, and so people just move a few around, and they don't get caught. Then you have a new population established. Then another person moves it to a different pond. You have a new population established, and so right now what we're trying to learn is first how bad is this problem we're dealing with, so we know how to deal with future new establishments. And also, like, for example, there's talk of people trying to regulate snakehead and do a snakehead, like a pro snakehead league, and they want snakehead managed. And we got to first figure out how bad are these snakeheads. If they're terrible, we may not want to recommend releasing them everywhere. If they have mild effects, then okay, then maybe they've already established we can discuss like a limits on snakeheads, but we got to know the effects first. And same with blue catfish and these other fish as we bring in as well. And so that's what we're trying to do. But also touching on again the electrofishing and how we can't remove all those electrofishing. At least Zach and I can't. We could probably fit about 100, maybe 200 fish in our boat, like 15 to 10-pound catfish. We can't fit any more than that. And
probably about 5 minutes.
Yeah, or a couple hours, and as it warms up, we can get it more quickly. But again, it takes a lot of. There's so much fish; they make up so much biomass, like half the biomass in the entire river. That it's an impossible task to remove them all. We can encourage people to eat them and catch them to reduce their population, but we're just trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out what we're up against.
I guess I can kind of touch more a little bit too on the removal side of things. So. There was a study done down in Georgia, I believe on the Satilla River in Georgia, by some biologists down there with Georgia DNR. And they did a fairly long-term flathead removal project, so with some invasive flathead catfish down there. And they actually did show, I believe, a reduction in abundance as well as kind of truncated the size structure, so like removed a lot of the larger individuals from the population. And they did see a noticeable impact from just constant removal efforts. So not saying that that's, all systems are created equal here, because it is a very different system and flatheads are a different fish. But, with something like a lot of removal efforts, it is within the realm of possibility, though tons and tons of effort. Because like you said, the biomass of blue catfish out there is staggering. It surprises me every time we're out in the water. And to think of removing it all is certainly not possible. Although, can we selectively remove some of these larger individuals in certain areas that are more sensitive to or have a greater abundance of some of those migratory fish that we care about, ensuring that they spawn well? I think it's within the realm of possibility, although it requires resources, money, and a lot of boat space, which we don't have.
And there have been some successful removals of snakeheads from, like, I know in upstate New York, they were in one small little creek system and a pond. And that's something that there was removal. Like they took all the snakeheads out and they haven't come back there. Chesapeake Bay, I'm saying it's just such a large body. You can remove from individual ponds, but Chesapeake Bay is such a large body. But there's more manageable bodies, especially early on. Yes, you can remove.
No, it's done, dude. They're all over the place. But
you just brought up a really interesting question. I got another science question for you guys. So lots of guys
back on snakeheads again.
I love that point.
With rockfish out for April, a lot of guys have been going out and catching these blue cats in the upper bay and in the middle bay. They're catching them from Sandy Point. They're pitching out, 10-aught circle hooks with a chunk of fish on it, and they're reeling up cats. But here's the thing. You can keep them up to, like 32 inches, and they're good to eat. But then beyond that, everybody says, you don't want to eat them, right? Yep. But look, I don't want to just kill fish willy-nilly, right? I don't want to stick them in the head and throw them back in the water. When I get to 34, the 38-inch, the big blue cats, what am I supposed to do? What do I do with them?
Yeah, because I mean,
that's a good question.
Because I actually had the same thing. Noah, look, I brought you guys on because you guys are the smart part of this pet. And so I do have a question. When, I believe bow fishermen, and we'll bring that up again, I think they have a control factor. I watch them. They fill the whole front of their decks up with boats. And what I didn't know that gar were actually native to Maryland. And he said it was. So we're watching. I just seen a whole picture with just like a boatload of gar on it. Now, I know that I was with David Confair that was on us the one time. Now he said he thought this was gar was a stack of gar, so I was like, God, look at that whole boat full of, you got gar and you got, not even the invasives, but I am so on the fence because I do believe that they have a control factor for invasive species. No matter what they are.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm almost there. Like, what do you do with a boatload of fish? They're not taking all of them home.
Yeah, with the gar and stuff. So, bow fishing is something that's been understudied and very underregulated, and I think we need to invest more research and time and this resources in just learning more about the effects of bow fishing. Yes, bow fishing definitely has a impact that could be used to mitigate the effects and reduce the population of invasive species. But a lot of people shoot, either unintentionally misidentify like a bowfin or a gar as snakeheads, or intentionally kill everything they see because they just want to shoot things. And
yeah, they're paying. The customers are paying for it.
Exactly. There's a range. Some people just shoot invasive species, but then there's some that shoot everything. And there was a big video that was circulating last year on 1,000. These people shot 1,000 gar in a native habitat and counted them one by one, throwing them back in the water, 1,000 dead fish in the water, while in the middle of their spawning season where they're all congregating to spawn, which probably has big impacts. And so I think we need to have regulations on bow fishing, just like we have for hook and line fishing, to make sure this doesn't happen. And education of these bowfish anglers and particularly we also need protection of these, what's historically been called rough fish, but I prefer the term like non-game fish, because rough fish has some bad historical connotations. And so these non-game fish like gar, suckers, these things that are important to the ecosystem, but right now it's legal to just kill as many as you want because, hey, I want to kill some things, so I'm going to kill these. And that does affect the ecosystem. But I do want to touch on the really big catfish real quick. So there's really large ones, those like ones bigger than 30-something inches. You can eat them. They're not as good. They may not be as like good kind of size cuts, but it's just like eating tuna. Those larger ones, they are bigger, they're larger, they have more time to have accumulated toxins and heavy metals like mercury and things like that, just like tuna. They've had more time. But like tuna, you still eat tuna. You don't eat tuna for every meal. You eat them a couple times a month or something like that. Well, those larger catfish, they're still safe to eat a couple times a month. If you're pregnant or a baby, you may want to not have as much kind of thing. Same with like sushi and stuff like that if you're pregnant. But those bigger ones are still safe to eat. You just want to have less of it because the longer the fish lives, the bigger it gets, the more and more of those toxins it can accumulate in its lifetime, in the process called bioaccumulation. And then there's also biomagnification, where as it gets larger and larger, it's higher up on the food chain, eating things that they themselves have accumulated more and more of those things. And so you can eat them just like tuna, a little less.
I get what you're saying, though. I mean, it's hard because, like I was taught, if you kill an animal, you use it, you eat it, and you use it, and as much of it as you possibly can. And like, I definitely get your point. And I've had to adjust too to the mindset of these fish pose a serious threat, and I can help to eliminate a threat by doing something I'm a little uncomfortable with, literally just euthanizing it and getting rid of it. And it's not comfortable, and it's kind of just an adjustment in mindset. But I think just knowing that the potential, like any small benefit that you could have by getting rid of these big fish that eat anything and everything, like after seeing like the amount of native fish that they can just fit in their stomach at one point in time, like it's really just encouraged me to just kill everything we can possibly kill as far as blue cats go.
Zach, what's the record of amount of things you've seen in one catfish stomach so far?
So I mean, like I've seen like 8 or 9 individual fish over, anything from like, what would it be, like probably 9 to 12-inch white perch. So a particular example I'm thinking back to was this fish that had a head of a striper in its stomach, as well as I think 3 white perch, another blue catfish, I think 3 different shiners, and then like another fish that I couldn't identify. So like, you're at one point, in the last how long the digestion phase is, probably somewhere on the order of 5 to 6 hours, maybe a little longer, a little less depending on the water temperature. This fish has eaten, like 8 or 9 other fish that we care about, right? So stuff like white perch and striper. So,
well, this on the striper thing. I mean, now we hear people when we talk about blue crabs, they're saying, well, stripers are eating the blue crabs, and they're eating all the blue crabs, they're eating the mini blue crabs. I mean, Jesus, Mary and Joseph. I mean, everything's eating everything. I mean, ain't that the way it's supposed to be? You live for the fittest inside of anything. I mean,
I think to that point, it's this is a role that has not been previously filled within the Chesapeake Bay, right? Because yes, there are big striper here. Big striper eat big fish in fish, right? And that's fine, but they also go in and out of the system. They migrate and they move into other areas, like we've talked about, moving up and down the Atlantic coast. So certainly. Now, however, we have this big, long-lived catfish that is extremely aggressive. They eat tons and tons of fish, and they're present year-round in our systems here. So they're filling a role that has not been previously filled within the Chesapeake Bay, and I think that's where the problem lies.
Yeah,
Laddie's going to like, okay, say it. You've been around here you've been on the water. Look, I'm a pretty old guy, but I think you've been on the water way longer than I. Well, maybe not way longer, maybe about 5 years longer than I have. But I mean, you've been around here, on and off. You've seen all the trends. I mean, what do you think about? I mean, when it comes to I know we've already. God darn it, we went off to the snakeheads and the blue cats again. But we were supposed to be talking about the stripers. I mean. So
it's all connected.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah. I mean, you're right. Because when they're catching snakeheads underneath the Bay Bridge in the crab traps, I mean, I've seen them pull them up. The snakeheads are in the middle of the bay, saltwater, and I don't know. So I'm gonna give you 2 things. I want to know how to catch them right now. If you were going out on a nice, not a 50-mile-an-hour wind day like it is today, God, the wind has been it's and you guys on kayaks, it's like you don't even think about going out.
Kayak's been roughing lately.
Yeah, it's been a struggle, man.
So I've been going. I live on a lake here, and so I just go for my hour of kayak fishing after work, and I'm like, I'm just gonna get my exercise in, just kayaking on this treadmill going uphill, and maybe I'll get a fish or 2.
Shut up, Sean. I'm just trying to be the funny host here. I got all the good looks. They got all the brains. All right.
Sam, were you asking the best way to catch the snakehead now, or the blue cats, or?
No, Steve, we're not talking about snakeheads. We're talking about stripers.
No, but to get back to the question you asked about striper, it's like when I first got back to Maryland after my last duty station down in Georgia, that's really what I came back and targeted. was striper. Because I mean, if you grow up being a Maryland native and you're anywhere close to the Chesapeake Bay, you tend to become familiar with that fish, and they're a great fish. They're
State
fun
fish.
on top. Yeah, they're fun on top water. They're fun underneath, on subsurface, jigging, snap jigging. I don't care what it is, and they taste great. It's but I guess one larger point here, because like we're trying to kind of tie all this together, and it again goes to the core of this conversation that we're having between fisheries biologists and fishermen. Because on the one hand, in the fishing community, there's a very like strong streak for like freedom, like the freedom to pursue the fish when I want to pursue them, utilize the resource, et cetera, et cetera. But with freedom really comes that responsibility, and the responsibility for us fishermen is to be or try to become that more informed fisherman. So we have this dialogue that we're developing here with our fisheries biologists, because I don't think any of us want to see a moratorium. Some people do, like, because and to their mind, that's what it's going to take, to get striped bass back on the kind of a glide path to recovery. But whether it's striped bass or white perch, or you get into these other conversations about spot burning, what that all really comes down to is the irresponsible use of the resource, taking more than we need, and trashing the area, doing damage to the water quality, reducing the spawning habitat because of sedimentation and all these other issues we have, especially coming out of the Susquehanna and the Upper Bay.
Ugh.
It really is, and it sucks because it's not easy, right? Like you really developing this all-inclusive, holistic picture of what's going on. It's not easy. It requires a lot of thought and consideration and reading. But when it comes to how do we fix this issue, that's what we're talking about. That's when we're trying to connect these two communities between fishing and the fisheries biologists, and then make it that we as fishermen we're not just takers, we're active participants in the management. So like me personally, am I going to target striper? Probably not, because blue cats, if you fillet them right, you cut away everything but the white meat, taste fantastic. Snakehead taste fantastic. So these invasive species, and someone said it earlier, we should use them as a pressure relief valve in terms of our consumption. Like, we should move away from some consumption, especially on the recreational side of striped bass, and move into harvesting more of the blue cats and the snakehead to try to A, reduce their biomass, and B, just take some of the pressure off those striped bass. So like me personally, I might do some catch and release fishing for striped bass, but you're not going to see one on my stringer. And I mean, if you want to do that, I get it, man. It's like, we grew up doing this with our parents. We want to pass it on to our kids. We have a great time doing it. I get it, man. Like, grilled striped bass tastes fantastic. I'm not saying it doesn't. But, if we all do our part as fishermen to try to be a little bit more responsible, then, we can help, try to dig ourselves out of the hole we dug for ourselves. Because make no mistake, humans at the center of all this. We can talk about invasive species and everything else, but we're at the center of all this. Like, we brought the invasive species here. We're the ones degrading water quality. We're the ones over harvesting. And, we have to put a stop to that. It's like I said, we're not on a sustainable path. So I'll get off my soapbox right there.
It's a tragedy of the commons issue.
Yeah.
Where you have these common resources in an unregulated world. As long as everybody acts fairly, and then there'll be no issues. But if you have one person cheats the system, makes it unfair for everybody else. So then everybody scrambles and is like, well, they're going to cheat it. I want to cheat it. And then I'm going to pollute the water. I'm going to take all these fish. I'm going to take that fish. And we all have to work together on these issues.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned water quality.
I love it.
It's like a pet peeve of mine, particularly with the summer floaters and the recreational anglers being blamed for them all. And they closed down 2 weeks of the season, and there were dead fish floating all over the place.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not just rockfish. If you actually go out and drive around and look at the fish, it's an accumulation of species. There's a lot of rock. There's blue cats. There are carp. There are bunker. There's actually a lot of dead fish floating around. And water quality has got to be playing a huge role in all of this. And it seems like all of our efforts over the last, certainly in my lifetime, have amounted to basically holding the line as population grows and development continues.
Yeah.
And holding the line just ain't good enough.
Well, the same water quality issues that affect stripers in the summer also affect other fish. So you have, in the summer, that's where you have higher mortality of striped bass because warmer water holds less oxygen. And so after a fish fights and is tired, it's not really able to catch its breath as well. Even if it swims off quickly, it may not be able to get enough oxygen after that initial tail burst out of sight into 2 feet deeper water of murkiness. And so it may not be able to catch its breath and survive. But any perch or catfish or whatever, they're also stressed by that same lack of oxygen. But then again, there's other pollutants like from agricultural pollution that we're trying to see the influence on the species we're studying now. We're seeing some weird effects that Zach can talk a little bit about. We're also seeing, like, there could also be some, let's say, heavy metal and just your typical, what you think of pollution coming in. And that can have effects. That's going to be more, I think, in Upper Bay and more tributary specific, where you're going to have those big die-offs because it gets diluted as it goes further down. But there's also some interesting fish kills that I know Zach has experienced in the winter, which you can talk about.
That mostly related to cold weather stuff, right? So, I mean, that can be natural. But yeah, I guess like to kind of go off that point of water quality. I mean, Noah, you might know a little bit more about this, but I mean, I think, what do you think about speaking to Chesapeake Bay water quality over the last 30 to 40 years? I mean, I think, like, what do you think? Do you think we're seeing improvements? I mean,
I think we are seeing, like, you go a while ago, like it was like in the 70s when they stocked blue catfish in the bay, particularly on the Virginia side. The water quality there was terrible. It was just like, oh, let's just dump as much mercury in the water. Everything's dead. And that's why they decided to stock the blue catfish, because there's nothing alive. Blue catfish are really tolerant of crap conditions. Let's put them in there to offer things for people to catch. And since then, it's gotten better. It's not perfect, and there's definitely some flaws you can point at, but it's gotten better. And certain specific things may be worse, but overall, it's gotten better.
Yeah, and I think it definitely has an impact. I think you're correct in saying that for sure. Although I would say that it's probably not just water quality, but also water modifications. I know that's something that in Virginia, it can be a severe limitation to recruitment of fish, right? So if these fish aren't able to make it into upstream reaches to spawn, then obviously they're not going to be able to reproduce as much and as successfully. So again, it's like kind of the theme of the night is that it's like so many different things contributing to one issue. And I think I liked what you said a lot, Steve, about kind of having it is very similar. The goal is the same, right? So we're all want the same goal, but the way of achieving that goal is where it seems that people tend to disagree. Yeah. And it is incredibly hard to like take into to make everyone happy, I guess at the end of the day is the challenge. But I think just recognizing that, in fact, the goal for everyone at the end of the day is the same. Like, as fisheries biologists, we don't want to tell people they can't go out and fish and catch fish and kill fish and eat them, right? That's something like I grew up eating striper, so I get it. You know, at the end of the day, we want people to be able to catch and keep fish and eat them because it's something we've been doing for how many, hundreds of thousands of years, right? So,
since God.
Yeah. So exactly, kind of just figuring out the way that we can get there and hopefully make as many people as happy as we can while doing that is where I think the challenge is.
Yeah, we have to all get on board with it. And like even the things like that we don't have control over now, like invasive species, sure, they're going to bring the striper population down to here or something like that. But just because they're down to here doesn't mean we can keep fishing at this level, even though the invasive species aren't far. We got to bring it down to here to keep it sustainable, because you can't tell the catfish, like, hey, stop eating the stripers. They're not going to listen to you. So we all have to understand that it's a complicated system, but we need to work together to have the best goal for the most people.
Well, if we do all the good things for the Chesapeake Bay, and then we have everything from New York and Pennsylvania coming through the dam that, I mean, I've seen a picture of a lovely pile of just junk sitting on the other side of the Conowinger Dam that I think the other day, now I don't know if they did or not, they were supposedly going to open up like 9 gates that day. I haven't heard too much from that, but I mean, it's unbelievable what's on the other side of that dam.
Yeah, it's a shame because, I mean, the degree to which we experience pain with all these environmental issues depends in large part on the degree to which we can be proactive. And honestly, we are not good at that. Like, we tend to kick the can down the road, especially in the political sphere, until we just can't avoid the issue anymore. and then we have a catastrophe on our hands. And, you know, that's kind of the point that we're nearing with the Conowingo Dam and all that sediment that's built up, because it's not just sediment and debris. It's everything that's in that sediment. You know, and like I can't even imagine, like, because you're talking about water coming down from Harrisburg and all like the old industrial sector and everything else that was up there. You know, if we can't find a good solution for that, and I think there's litigation pending. I haven't checked into it, you know, real recently, but you know, I'll put this out there. Like a lot of guys in the fishing community, we tend to be, you know, conservative in a lot of our ideology. And one of those things that goes kind of hand in hand with conservative ideology is, you know, an opposition to regulation. But when you're regulating fisheries that are impacted by populations of millions and millions of humans, and you know, thousands and thousands of acres of farmland, in all the lawns and all the fertilizers, and it's like it sucks. You know, I get it. It's like we all like America freedom, and I'm there with you. But like I said before, with freedom comes responsibility. That's the cost of having your freedom, is conducting yourself responsibly. And, you know, that's something that as a fishing community, we just have to get our arms around, you know, otherwise we are going to receive that kind of top down control eventually, or we're going to see the collapse of, you know, fisheries or environments that we love. You know, that's the other thing about it. Like, you know, maybe not even worry about the top down pressure. You know, look at like the croaker fishery and see what that has become over the years, right? You know, it's like you can go on and on when you read the history, like the cod fishery up in the northern states in New England. Like like Noah was saying before, the tragedy of the commons, the absent regulation, there's a lot of greedy people out there who will just harvest to no end. And some of those people will never reach, but the more and more of us that kind of get our arms around trying to be like that benefit, trying to be that responsible member of the community, you know, I'm optimistic at heart. You know, at the end of the day, like we're having this conversation, and I appreciate all you fellas being on here, because I know that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're all of a like mind for that kind of thing, and this is what it takes. These kind of conversations.
I'm going to turn that right back around to the very beginning of our conversation when asked about spot burning, because this is exactly why we need to take these new folks, and there are a lot of them. Ever since COVID hit, there are a lot of new folks coming into the fishing community. And we got to welcome them with open arms and encourage them and talk to them about this stuff. And we need to see them be successful. We want these folks to catch fish. We want them to help build a stronger fishing community. We want them to have a good time. And we want them to understand all this. And it's really, in my opinion, critically important that we welcome these folks with open arms and make sure they're having a great time out on the water. And at the same time, make sure that they understand the impact that they're having, or potential impact, by being out on the water.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's like you kind of touched on license sales a little bit earlier. I mean, guess where license sales, the money from license sales goes? I mean, directly into supporting natural resources. So fully agree, getting that next generation of anglers involved and enjoying themselves and also educated at the same time as they enter the angling community is super important. So
yeah, this relates to like a conversation I had with like a Maryland politician a couple of years back, or not even earlier this year, where I was discussing like, oh, catch and release fishing is awesome, have a blast with it. And then she commented on my post, is like, well, if you enjoy these fish so much, why not just not catch them so that they can stay healthy and alive without damage from hooks and fighting and things like that? The way I try to explain it is, tell people there's this awesome thing out there that you have no idea it exists. They're going to be less likely to want to protect that thing if they don't know it exists. By doing this catch and release rather than like blanket carpet cleaning, like just removing everything out of the ocean because they don't understand what's in there, by just getting people to appreciate what's there, they're more likely to protect it. And so you have to give a little, you have to give a little so you can really appreciate the whole. And she was like, oh, I never had that explained. Like, that makes sense. And so we need to get these anglers to be like, here is this awesome resource, these fish, and I want you to appreciate these fish, but there is some responsibility that comes with it. So appreciate these fish and understand why they're important so that you can also protect these fish.
She's never had a 20-pound rockfish in her line.
No, but I'm going to take her fishing and get her one. And
there you go.
I would do.
And she will. She is now on board and is helping me with the efforts to have some action on the omega protein. I explained the situation with the menhaden, and she's like, you know what? That does make sense, and I'm here to support this because we're all trying to work together on this. We just all need to be as informed on these issues as possible.
That's why I brought you guys here.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also to that point, just to get back to omega and what you were saying, Steve, about politics is, as biologists, you are limited in the scope of what you can do because so many of the decisions that are made are left to politicians, right? So, I mean, we can do the research, we can generate the data, and we can make our own sort of inferences and recommendations, although oftentimes with some aspects of fisheries management can be left to politicians, and that's just kind of where we're at. And trying to make, I think what you said, Noah, about getting people involved and excited about fish and also understanding, why they're important and why we should care about them is really important, because the more people that care and actually see it as not just, something on a ballot, but an actual issue that affects people that tons of people care about, is huge.
Yeah, I'll add, if you care about these issues like the menhaden or striped bass regulation, snakeheads, whatever it is you care about, send a letter. Oh, okay. Freshwater fish, snakeheads, it doesn't really apply for the Fisheries Management Council. That's a different body. But for like the striped bass and menhaden, if you care about these issues, write to your, you can look up online, just either Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, wherever you're at, look at your Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission delegates. Look them up, find out your delegates, and there's also specific delegates for the menhaden issue. Look up your delegates and send them an email. There are some comments right now, there's some talks about changing the menhaden and striper regulations. If you have thoughts on this, send them an email right now, because at the end of the month they're going to meet and talk about this. And say you're concerned about the striped bass, you're concerned about the menhaden, and that's how you can help make action so that you can protect your fisheries.
Send me the link, and I'll put it underneath the link or email. No, I got to find out who the.
Quick suggestion on that. If you direct people to CCA Maryland, they actually have a new webpage up. I think it's called Take Action or Action Now. That lists out the critical items going on at any given time and gives you links to the particular people to contact. CCA Maryland is a fantastic resource to utilize to figure out what's going on and how to give your public input on items like this. And I completely agree with you. It is, God, so imperative that everybody chime in on this stuff.
Yeah, we were just talking earlier before a lot of guys come on. I'm just going to remind us. So I know that Lenny has Fish Talk Magazine YouTube channel, so please go to his channel. You got Cambo trout. He will most likely for the rest of the summer be snakehead fishing, so you won't see no blue catch or no nothing but snakeheads. But he will teach everything you need to know. I'm actually going out with Sean from Hookset TV. We're going to do some snakehead fishing. My new twist to my channel is going to start on my next video. And so next week, I just want to remind anybody here, I'm going to have one more live stream next Tuesday at 7:30. I'll post it. I'm going to have commercial blue crabbers here. I'm going to have one from Maryland, which is my buddy next door, Captain Rachel. I'm going to have Kirk from Florida, who is a commercial crabber, and I'm going to have Robert from Louisiana. These three guys are all commercial crabbers from different states. I think it's going to be pretty interesting on even, I think the big debate on, how we eat them, whether you boil it, garlic, or we boil them or we steam them. So I think that would be, they boil them. They do garlic in Florida. I know.
There you go, Lenny.
No, it's J.O., man. It's J.O. when you steam them. But
that's what happened tonight.
But yeah, so I don't know. I'm pretty good. Just talk more right now. I haven't had
great questions popping up here. I want to hear the science guys talk about these
salinity
popping up.
Exactly.
Well, the salinity, like I think when I was talking earlier, is that as we're talking coming up in our brackish waters, the salinity and everything coming further and further up the bay, it seems like where I was talking to Robert in Louisiana. He's talking how the freshwater is pushing out the salinity of down there. So
I don't know. Taking a long-term view, I don't think the salinity is really creeping up in the bay, is it? It doesn't, at least in my neck of the woods. I mean, some years, but taking a broad view, I'm not sure. Have you guys?
So I don't know too much on the salinity issue, but in like a decadal view things with the rising oceans, I imagine there is some level of creeping up as the oceans rise. Like that'll bring the salinity with it.
Yeah,
but it's really seasonal. Seasonal is really impact. Winter, you're gonna have there's gonna be less of that water flowing down the rivers, so there's gonna be the bay's gonna be a little saltier. Summer, with all the summer rainstorms, it's gonna be a little bit less salty, and so it's hard to tell. You could have maybe a little bit of an off year. These things, like, it fluctuates a little bit around a set normal.
So you're talking that. So are you telling? Or so you're telling me that all these climate change guys are lying to me? I'm just kidding. I'm only kidding.
That makes sense to me. But by the same token, I remember in the 70s we had a big old drought, and we were catching bull sharks at the Chesapeake Bay Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I kind of,
you can catch bull sharks in, I think the highest record up is like Illinois or something up the Mississippi. And so you can have them in complete freshwater. That doesn't mean anything.
Well, the salinity was very, very, it was way higher back then. Mm-hmm. It was like, what was the 70s drought? Was like a 7-year, 8-year drought.
Yeah. Really? These things are influenced by these long-term climate oscillations. So you have things like El Nino, and La Nina is probably the most well-known, and that fluctuate. It's like a 7-year cycle of like more droughts and more rains, and we could be in, and that could influence it. But then there's also like the multi-decadal oscillation. That's like every 25 to 50 years it flips. And so
say that again.
The multi-decadal oscillation.
Woo!
It's like El Nino. Exactly. Well, it's particularly the Pacific decadal multi-oscillation, but just being in the Pacific, it influences everything across the world because the whole Pacific Ocean has a huge impact on the entire world's climate. But these things oscillate, and they generally go in waves. But then you have these other waves at different intervals going with it. And so sometimes you may have like an up and a down that cancels out, an up and a half up, 2 ups. And there are these you have to look at these really long-term trends and look at it in the context of these climate oscillations. It's a complex issue, but it's using 1 year as an example doesn't really work. Just like with climate change, you say like, oh, it snowed today. There's no climate change. It's like you look at the trends.
It's snowing up north right now. They just got like a foot of snow up there on the East Coast.
But again, that there is these different trends where like overall the average whole world is increasing. But again, the climate's causing the weakening of the Gulf Stream. And so the Gulf Stream pushes warm water north along the coast, and weakening of that allows some polar air to come down south. And so you may have like down south being from like Arctic Circle Canada down to the northern states. And so it may be snowing there a little bit more at odder times. But still, that's because there's less warm air. That's because the air, it's all these different things are changing and in flux.
You're right. It is. You're right. It's climate change. It's climate change.
Climate change. Another thing in regards to climate change too, with more severe climate events becoming more and more common, that could certainly impact a lot of these things as well. So not only salinity, but just about everything, right? So,
this question here is, I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead, buddy.
No, I was just saying, circling back to the striper fishery, what we're really talking about here. If waters do warm, and this is where I like to get, especially Noah and Zach's take on this, striper, we already know striper don't do well in really warm water, right? If waters continue to warm like that, then what I would expect to happen is to see shifts from those like fish, but either shifts or collapse, one of the two, where like you're going to see like the different species moving kind of a little bit farther north in latitude because like it's kind of a range expansion or a range exchange. Mm-hmm. So, whether it's, like the whole debate around like man-made climate change versus cycles, et cetera, we're not going to solve that debate here tonight, but in terms of the impact that we're talking about right here, those warming waters are not going to be beneficial to striper. They're certainly not. And we're probably going to see more things like redfish, more speckled trout, Well, but actually, from Noah and Zach, I'm just a guy from fisheries biologist perspective. Does that kind of pass the smell test? What do y'all think?
Absolutely. So I've been to these fisheries management meetings, and there's some data that I've seen where like over 15 years, the flounder populations have shifted on average like 1 whole degree latitude northward in terms of their like average abundance. Same, and black sea bass have also shifted up a little bit, and like a lot of different species on average shifted 1 degree latitude north. I don't know offhand how much that is, but that's multiple many miles of north, and so in just 15 years. And so you're going to have a lot of things shifting north. I think sea trout and red drum here are going to be fine. Like you have them in the Gulf, southern Florida. This is not the southernmost edge of their range. But some things like striped bass, where this is getting close to the southernmost range, they're going to be more at risk because like at this part of the range, they may not be able to survive, so they may have to move up. But then again, things at the northernmost part of the range that have to move up, there may be other limiting factors that prevent them from being able to go up, like competing predators. Or if they go up, they may then compete with other predators there and things like that. And so there is this shifting upwards, and it may benefit. Then there will be winners and losers of it.
Yeah, and it's not just here. This is across North America. We're seeing,
the world.
This is a concern for everything. It's particularly a concern for native salmonids out on the West Coast, right? So salmon and trout, like they're probably going to be the first ones to really feel that really, really heavy impact of climate change, if not already feeling some of those impacts. So yeah, I mean, definitely could be a concern here too, though, with stripers, like you said, being sensitive to those summertime warm water temperatures, like we've talked about with fish floating up and all kinds of stuff. It certainly poses a risk.
All right, so what I'm going to do is, because it's going on an hour, we're going almost an hour and a half, and we can sit here. It's one of them things that once we kind of start talking, and I hate to shut this down. I just don't know what everybody has to do because I this is my Friday night, so I don't have to do nothing tomorrow but sit around.
Friday? What?
No, it's for me. I'm off work tomorrow. I don't work tomorrow, so this is my night. I usually have a beer in my hand, but I wanted to. I wanted to.
How do we know you don't?
Huh?
How do we know you don't?
Yeah, actually, you don't, do you? But guys, I appreciate it. Lenny was kind of calling somebody saying, "Hey, man, what's come on my YouTube channel and talk stuff?" Sometimes you're like, "Oh my God, these YouTube guys!" I hear that so much. But I bring you guys up, and I'm hoping maybe we're going to talk blue crabs next week. But I really hope maybe once everything kind of slows up, where it really never slows up, you fish all year long. One fish catch, video, edit, wrap up. Cut it. Look, I'm going out with Sean. We're going. I mean, I got all these guys that So we were going to go snakehead fishing. I asked him, I said, "Whatever you want to do, man. We're going to go snakehead fishing." Problem is with the kayaks, you're not going to be able to get in. I got my boat, so you're not going to be able to get into places you could with the kayaks. But I got another kayak thing another snakehead thing coming up. And what do you, Steve? Let's just tell everybody what you got coming up. What do you got coming up, Steven? Jesus, snakehead, Jesus, man.
So I'm going to try and tell y'all. I think my connection is getting a little bit scratchy here. Can y'all still hear me? Okay.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, I just want to make sure. All right. So I got a bunch of events coming up, but we got some meetups. We're trying to get some more cleanups on the calendar, but really we're moving into snakehead tournament season now. Without going off on that whole tangent we talked about earlier with tournaments.
That's all right. Steve, go ahead, buddy.
Yeah. But I mean, that's my thing. Like, if you want to know what's going on with me and my channel and all my events, make sure you're following Legion of Anglers on Facebook and Cambo Trout Fishing on Facebook. Any events that I have coming up, I'll make sure they're on the calendar there. So you can check it out for that kind of intel over there. Thanks, man.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Noah, what do you got coming up? You just going fishing? You cutting open a bunch of fish, right?
Yeah, a lot of fishing. I'm trying to go fishing every day in Johnson Pond whenever I can.
Shut up! Stop telling people where you fish.
It's not a secret. I'm not gonna tell you where or what they're biting unless you text me personally. But I just fish there because it's convenient. But Zach and I are now the weather's warming up. Weather's warming up. We're gonna start going for more snakeheads to get some for our research. But also something that we're gonna start doing is if any of y'all are in around Salisbury, we're gonna start tabling at the third Friday events in Salisbury, where there's a big downtown celebration, a lot of tables, and we're gonna have tables, a lot of scientific resources about the research we're doing, about other educational materials about fish in the bay. So come on by, take a look at it, and enjoy all the local festivities as well.
All right, Mr. Zachary.
Yeah, I guess to add to that too, kind of stay tuned about hopefully, like Noah was talking about with that grant that we kind of had put in for earlier, I guess this month. Hopefully we'll have some events coming up. So we'll hopefully be getting out for some blue catfish and snakehead tournaments potentially. So stay tuned for some more to come out on that. As far as what I'll be doing, I'll be in the lab looking at fish guts. So if you need me, that's where you'll find me, staring at fish puke.
Yeah, we're hoping to plan those tournaments to be in those last 2 weeks of July when the striper season's closed, to encourage people to go for blue catfish and snakeheads and to explore this as an alternative to striper fishing.
Well, the best thing we'll do, maybe you got all summer to really get into it. Maybe once it gets in the late fall, maybe we'll all come back on and we'll talk about what you came up with. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
How about, all right, Lenny, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to come out. And, I know we didn't get into really a lot of technical stuff about fishing and everything, but I think the big issue is the pollution and stuff like that. But won't you tell us the best time to check you out anytime on year? I know you do a lot of live streams and stuff.
Well, I'll tell you, Live with Lenny comes on the first Thursday of every month. We've been doing it at 5. We're actually going to push it back to 7, or I think 6 next time. I don't know. Zach will send out an email. Our Zach, not this Zach. But our big thing coming up is the Bay Bridge Boat Show. It starts on Thursday. We have the Fish Talk Fishing Pavilion for the first time ever this year. I would encourage anybody who wants to get into fishing, especially if you got kids, to come and check it out. We're going to have Maryland Fishing and Hunting will be there. We'll have some guides there. We will have some lure makers there. Most importantly, we'll have casting spots set up for the kids, and all the kids are going to win a prize, whether they manage to cast that little plastic worm into the hole or not. They're all going to win a prize. So Bay Bridge Boat Show going on Thursday through the weekend. It's going to be great. I just want to say for the record, Noah, I love Johnson's Pond.
I love Johnson's Pond. That's why shut up. Stop telling people what Johnson's Pond is.
I hate to break it to you, but I've written about it several times.
I know.
It's one of the most interesting lakes in this state. I mean, it's got everything. It's got little secluded spots. It's got areas where you listen to rap music, whether you want to or not. It's got areas where you're like up on the rich people's shoreline.
Right. That's Zach's side.
Got some big old bass and tons of big old pickerel. I love the place.
I talk about it not because
he said the no word.
What?
We ain't going to say the word. We don't want to say the word that he caught in Johnson's Pond. He said the no. You don't do the no. The fleet of kayakers will be heading down here.
I say it not because it's the best body of water to fish. I talk about it because I live on it, and so if I want to go fishing for 5 minutes, doesn't mean other Leonard's Mills may be better, but it's convenient and I can catch whatever I feel like catching.
I love Johnson's Pond. I used to drive to it. When I lived on the Western Shore as a chicken necker down here now on the Eastern Shore, I used to drive. I used to go there all the time. It's really it's pretty too. It's really a pretty place.
A lot of wildlife too. Ospreys, eagles everywhere. I saw a lot of little turtles hatching this week. A lot of gosling chicks hatching this week. So you have a lot of really angry geese there, which is not fun getting too close to on the kayak.
The geese
I've seen some foxes and otters playing in the water. It's a fun nature time.
The geese own that place. And
yes, they do.
If you live on the pond there, like when you see me in my little itty bitty mini boat with the e-propel motor, wave to me because you're going to see me.
Look for the yellow kayak. Got the yellow kayaks on there. I got a camera trap pointing at those, so I get to see the docks, and I get to see who casts all the lures in the trees and all that stuff. There's like 10 rattle traps up there. I got to figure out how to get them down.
All right. Well, guys, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been an hour and a half. And, I'll contact all you guys. Maybe come fall, we'll all get back together. But I do have one more live stream next Tuesday. I will put it out. And we're going to talk blue crabs next week. That's my specialty on my YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channels. You got Fish Talk Magazine YouTube channel, Cambo Trout, Legion of Anglers. You even got the Hookset TV. That dude over there giving me a bunch of bull boot. Hookset TV. You got a bunch of guys. You got Fishy Angler was on here. A bunch of YouTube guys. It's been really nice. Thank you guys for taking the time, and I really appreciate it. All right. Wait a minute.
All right.
Hold up.
Thanks.
Oh, Sam Tudor. No, I can't believe Sam wanted it at the last minute.
All right. I'll talk to y'all later. Thank you very much for coming by, guys.
All right.
See you.
All right, thanks.
Have a good one. Thanks for having us.